Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Pascal kills Dalton on Sidwell's orders, problematic professor must go? Gen Sidwell might direct Pascal to kill Professor Henry Hank Dalton. Will Sidwell decide that the problematic professor must go? Sidwell was already fed up with Dalton's lack of progress when he demoted him to work under Britt Westbourne. Britt also ratted Dalton out for pitching a new lucrative deal that didn't involve Sidwell at all. Dalton is disobeying Sidwell once more because he won't back down from the charges against Rocco Falconeri for breaking and entering. The last thing they need is the cops digging into what's really going on in the lab, but Dalton is too riled up to care. Since Dalton felt personally humiliated by Laura Collins, he's determined to get back at her by making her grandson suffer. Dalton constantly finds ways to demonstrate that he is a clueless wildcard who can't follow instructions. After Dalton stormed out on Sidwell in GH's November 13 episode, Sidwell's expression hinted at trouble. Dalton is an issue that needs to be handled sooner rather than later, so that may be what Sidwell was deciding in that moment. If Sidwell decides to wipe Dalton off the map, that may be a project for Pascal. Although Pascal is Sidwell's new butler at Windmere, he's got experience carrying out fatal orders. That was evident during Pascal's time supervising things at the Five Poppies resort. Sidwell may determine that Dalton needs to be taken care of and put Pascal to work on making it happen. Of course, Sidwell won't want to leave any trail behind that might tie him to Dalton's demise. It's possible Sidwell could try to frame Sonny Corinthos due to his link to Rocco and make another mess for the mob boss. However, it's also possible Sidwell will just want Dalton to disappear or that he'll try to make this seem like an accident. Regardless, Dalton's days may be numbered, so stay tuned for updates on any potential news about a fatal professor. Britt's pushback makes fans question Sidwell's status as head of this op. Since returning to Port Charles, Britt Westbourne has been really dishing out the attitude, and the fans are here for it. Hearing her tell Gen Sidwell what she will and won't do gives us that old fire we know and love from Britt, and it lends credibility to the theory that she really is the real deal, even if her brother Nathan West is not. Sidwell might lay the final smack down, but if Britt has the latitude to push back at all, it leads us to question whether Sidwell is really the head honcho in this situation after all. A shock settles in. With Britt refusing to take orders without fighting back, we can expect more pushback lies ahead when Giovanni Gio Palmieri, Emma Scorpio Drake, and Rocco Falconeri break into Professor Henry Hank Dalton's lab. What they find may raise additional concerns about Britt that Emma and Rocco, in particular, may find difficult to forget. It sounds like these kids will be devastated. With Britt said to be panicking in the aftermath later this week, will it force her to show us a more vulnerable side to herself? GH spoilers leak Pascal's new role is fitting. While some fans are theorizing that Pascal may be a secret ringleader in this underground operation, it hardly makes sense. He was clearly leading the life of a henchman and handler back at the Five Poppies, lording over Britt perhaps, but not really having any control over anyone else. Furthermore, all of his orders for her were at the behest of someone else, an elusive boss who clearly instilled fear in Britt. But is she actually afraid of who is pulling the strings, or is she afraid of losing the medication they're supplying? Sidwell is superior. Sidwell's role in this is quite clearly above Britt's head, but that could be just because he has the access to the drugs she needs to keep her Huntington's disease symptoms at bay. Is Sidwell really the lead bad guy in this situation, or is he taking his orders from someone even more sinister and acting as their front man so they can stay in the background with their fingerprints off of this entire operation? Using Britt to complete Caesar Faison's cold fusion project tracks if he were deployed. Either way, her comfort level with putting him in his place and battling him every time he requests more from her than whatever they originally agreed upon tells us she has her limits for how much she's going to bow down to this guy. Pascal may be on the verge of carrying out an unthinkable act, killing Professor Henry Hank Dalton on the orders of Gen Sidwell, and for viewers of General Hospital, the question on everyone's mind is whether Sidwell will truly decide that the problematic professor must go. Dalton's presence has long been a thorn in Sidwell's side, but recent events have escalated the situation to a breaking point. The tensions between Dalton and Sidwell have been simmering for months, fueled by professional disagreements, personal vendettas, and Dalton's persistent defiance. Sidwell, who is no stranger to manipulation and control, has reached the limits of his patience, and his latest expression during GH's November 13th episode hinted at a looming decision that could have catastrophic consequences for Dalton. The notion of eliminating a problematic professor may seem extreme, but in the world of Windermere and Sidwell's carefully curated machinations, extreme measures are often the only solutions. Sidwell's frustration with Dalton didn't arise overnight. For months, Dalton has been perceived as a wild card, someone whose lack of foresight and adherence to protocol continually jeopardized Sidwell's carefully laid plans. At the heart of the conflict lies Dalton's professional incompetence, or at least what Sidwell sees as incompetence. Despite Dalton's intelligence and scientific brilliance, his inability to consistently follow orders has repeatedly caused friction. Sidwell, who operates with meticulous precision and a desire to control every facet of his operations, saw Dalton's refusal to comply with his directives as a direct threat to his ambitions. The tipping point came when Sidwell demoted Dalton to work under Britt Westbourne, a move intended to rein in the professor's rogue tendencies. But rather than temper Dalton's insubordination, this demotion only deepened his resentment and increased his determination to act independently, often in ways that antagonized Sidwell even further. Britt Westbourne, always looking to protect her own interests, didn't help matters. Not one to shy away from exploiting Dalton's missteps for her benefit, she ratted him out for pitching a new lucrative deal that completely bypassed Sidwell. The betrayal not only embarrassed Dalton but also placed him directly in Sidwell's crosshairs, further tarnishing his standing in the eyes of the enigmatic Windermere figure. Sidwell, who values loyalty above all else, viewed this breach as both a professional affront and a personal insult. While Dalton may have thought he was merely exploring new opportunities, Sidwell saw it as a blatant act of rebellion, further cementing his growing disdain for the professor. Each infraction, no matter how minor it might have seemed to Dalton, added layers to the tension and made Sidwell increasingly convinced that drastic action might be necessary. Dalton's defiance did not end there. In recent episodes, he has openly refused to back off on pursuing the break-in charges against Rocco Falconeri, directly undermining Sidwell's interests once again. While Dalton claims to be motivated by justice or personal moral code, Sidwell interprets it as reckless disregard for the careful balance of power he maintains. The last thing Sidwell, or anyone associated with him, needs is law enforcement sniffing around Windermere and discovering the intricate web of secrets that lie beneath the surface. Yet Dalton, perhaps emboldened by his perceived moral high ground or perhaps simply too blinded by anger, refuses to step back. His actions risk exposing not only his own vulnerabilities but also the larger, more dangerous machinations Sidwell has painstakingly orchestrated. It's the sort of behavior that Sidwell cannot tolerate, particularly from someone as strategically expendable as Dalton. There is also a deeply personal angle to Dalton's obstinacy that further complicates the scenario. The professor, feeling humiliated by Laura Collins, has become determined to make her and her family pay, going so far as to target her grandson, Rocco. This vendetta adds another layer of unpredictability to Dalton's already problematic presence. Sidwell, who thrives on order, foresight, and the manipulation of others to achieve his goals, sees Dalton's personal grudges as yet another liability. In Sidwell's mind, Dalton is no longer simply a competent scientist or academic, he is a liability whose every action has the potential to unravel careful plans. The combination of professional incompetence, personal vendettas, and overt defiance positions Dalton squarely as someone whose days could very well be numbered if Sidwell decides that removal is the only solution. The scene in GH's November 13th episode was telling. When Dalton stormed out on Sidwell, the latter's expression was a study in restrained menace, hinting at the dangerous thoughts simmering beneath his calm exterior. Sidwell has long been portrayed as a figure who doesn't act rashly, someone who calculates risks and consequences before taking decisive action. Yet in that moment, it was clear that he was contemplating the possibility of a permanent solution to the Dalton problem. Sidwell doesn't make decisions lightly, and his careful observation of Dalton's behavior and repeated transgressions likely led him to consider options that extend far beyond verbal reprimands or demotions. Dalton, by failing to adhere to Sidwell's rules and actively threatening his operations, may have unwittingly painted a target on his own back. If Sidwell chooses to eliminate Dalton, Pascal may be the instrument of that decision. Pascal, while ostensibly serving as Sidwell's new butler at Windermere, is far from an ordinary domestic worker. His history is fraught with experiences that involve executing lethal tasks with precision and discretion. His time overseeing operations at the Five Poppies Resort demonstrated not only his ability to manage complex logistics but also his capability to carry out deadly assignments when required. Pascal's skill set makes him the perfect candidate to quietly and efficiently remove Dalton without leaving a trail that could implicate Sidwell. The combination of Pascal's loyalty, competence, and willingness to follow orders to their grim conclusion means that Dalton, should Sidwell decide to sanction such an action, is in grave danger. Sidwell's approach, however, would likely be calculated and indirect. Sidwell understands the importance of discretion and the dangers of leaving obvious evidence that could tie him to any fatal outcome. One plausible scenario is that he could instruct Pascal to make Dalton's disappearance appear accidental, perhaps staging a lab mishap or some other seemingly unavoidable incident. Another potential strategy could involve framing Sonny Corinthos, given Sonny's connections to Rocco and the broader underworld. Such a move would serve a dual purpose, eliminating Dalton while simultaneously creating chaos for Sonny, furthering Sidwell's broader agenda. However, while these machinations are theoretically possible, Sidwell's primary concern remains the secure removal of Dalton with minimal exposure or risk to himself, making Pascal the ideal operative for such a task. The tension between Sidwell and Dalton is emblematic of the larger themes that run through General Hospital: power, loyalty, and the lengths individuals will go to protect their interests. Dalton's obstinance and refusal to conform highlight the dangers of unchecked arrogance, while Sidwell's cold pragmatism underscores the ruthless efficiency of those who hold power in the shadows. Pascal's role as enforcer further illustrates the blurred lines between servant and weapon, showing how loyalty to a manipulative master can transform a seemingly benign figure into an instrument of deadly intent. The narrative is a study in escalating consequences, where a single misstep, Dalton's defiance, can trigger a chain reaction that imperils not just the individual but the delicate balance of the surrounding power structures. For viewers, the unfolding drama raises multiple questions. Will Sidwell take the ultimate step and order Dalton's demise? Will Pascal carry out the mission with his usual precision, or will unforeseen complications arise? How will other characters, particularly those connected to Rocco and the broader Windermere sphere, react if Dalton disappears under suspicious circumstances? The stakes are high, and the potential fallout is enormous. Dalton's story is now at a crossroads, and his future hangs in the balance as Sidwell weighs his options with the cold, analytical demeanor that has made him such a formidable figure in Port Charles. The suspense is intensified by the fact that Dalton, despite his flaws, may not fully grasp the danger he is in, or perhaps, knowing his penchant for defiance, he is willing to face whatever consequences his rebellion may bring. Ultimately, Dalton represents more than just an irritant to Sidwell. He embodies the unpredictability of human behavior in a high-stakes environment. His personal grudges, professional failures, and unwillingness to submit to authority make him both fascinating and perilous. Sidwell, ever the strategist, must decide whether the professor's removal is worth the risk and how best to orchestrate it without drawing unwanted attention. Pascal's potential involvement only heightens the tension, reminding viewers that in the world of Windermere, loyalty, skill, and discretion can be weaponized in ways that are both chilling and inevitable. As the narrative unfolds, Dalton's fate may serve as a cautionary tale about the consequences of underestimating those who operate from the shadows, those like Sidwell, who will stop at nothing to preserve control and achieve their objectives. In the meantime, fans of General Hospital are left on the edge of their seats, speculating about what might come next. Will Dalton survive the growing web of intrigue that surrounds him, or will Sidwell and Pascal successfully execute their plan to remove him from the picture? The combination of personal vendettas, professional rivalries, and the ever-present threat of deadly intervention creates a compelling, high-stakes scenario that is sure to keep viewers engaged. Dalton's story is a powerful reminder that in Port Charles, no one is truly safe when ambition, pride, and the thirst for control collide. For those watching closely, every interaction, every expression, and every decision could foreshadow the next dramatic twist in this intricate saga of power, revenge, and survival. As of now, Dalton remains a volatile figure whose actions continue to test Sidwell's patience and strategic thinking. His fate, teetering on the edge of Sidwell's judgment, underscores the dangerous interplay between hubris and authority. Pascal, ever the shadowy enforcer, waits in the wings, ready to act if called upon. Whether Dalton will find a way to redeem himself, face the consequences of his defiance, or meet a more sinister end is a question that will unfold in the coming episodes. For fans invested in the complex power dynamics of Windermere, the prospect of Pascal executing Sidwell's orders adds a layer of suspense and anticipation that is as thrilling as it is unsettling. Dalton's story is far from over, but one thing is clear: the problematic professor has made powerful enemies, and in Port Charles, that is never a position without peril. As the tension surrounding Dalton's potential fate escalates, it becomes increasingly clear that Sidwell is not merely motivated by personal frustration but by a calculated desire to maintain control over every facet of his world. Sidwell's operations at Windermere are highly intricate, built on layers of secrecy, manipulation, and influence. Every individual within his orbit, from Pascal to Brit, is expected to serve a purpose aligned with his broader objectives. Dalton's repeated acts of defiance, coupled with his tendency to act independently, threaten to unravel the careful ecosystem Sidwell has cultivated. In Sidwell's mind, allowing Dalton to continue unchecked is not merely an annoyance, it is a vulnerability, an unpredictable variable that could jeopardize years of meticulous planning. In a world where one misstep can trigger a cascade of unintended consequences, Sidwell is unlikely to tolerate such instability for long. Pascal's potential involvement in Dalton's removal adds a complex and morally ambiguous layer to the unfolding narrative. As Sidwell's new butler, Pascal occupies a dual role, one of service and one of shadow enforcer. His outward demeanor is calm, attentive, and composed, but beneath that exterior lies a man who has mastered the art of executing orders with precision and discretion. His prior experience at the Five Poppies Resort demonstrated not only organizational skill but also a willingness to undertake lethal tasks without hesitation or moral hesitation. Pascal's presence in the Windermere estate is therefore more than ceremonial. It serves as a silent threat, a reminder that Sidwell has both the resources and the personnel to enforce his will, regardless of the ethical implications. Dalton, for his part, appears largely unaware, or perhaps willfully dismissive, of the magnitude of the danger he faces. While his stubbornness and moral rigidity might inspire admiration in some circles, within Sidwell's calculating framework, they render him highly vulnerable. Dalton's insistence on pursuing the break-in charges against Rocco Falconeri, despite Sidwell's clear disapproval, exemplifies his tendency to prioritize principle over personal safety. From Sidwell's perspective, this behavior is reckless, as it draws law enforcement attention to activities and individuals that Sidwell prefers to keep hidden. Dalton's determination to hold Rocco accountable, while morally defensible, places him directly in the crosshairs of Sidwell's strategic thinking. Sidwell is not motivated by malice alone, he perceives Dalton as a liability whose actions could have far-reaching and destructive consequences if not contained. Furthermore, Dalton's personal vendetta against Laura Collins and her family adds an emotionally charged dimension to the conflict. His desire to inflict suffering on Rocco, motivated by his own humiliation at Laura's hands, underscores the professor's volatility. Sidwell, ever the master manipulator, recognizes that personal grudges like Dalton's are unpredictable and dangerous. Unlike calculated, goal-oriented individuals, Dalton is driven by emotion, which makes him difficult to control and even more difficult to predict. Sidwell's consideration of eliminating Dalton may therefore stem not only from professional frustration but also from a desire to neutralize a potential threat before Dalton's personal vendettas spiral out of control. The mechanics of how Sidwell might orchestrate Dalton's removal are equally intricate. Sidwell is unlikely to act directly, his modus operandi favors subtlety and deception. Pascal, with his proven capacity for executing complex tasks and his willingness to follow morally ambiguous orders, emerges as the ideal candidate to carry out any action against Dalton. The question then becomes not whether Dalton's removal will occur, but how it will be executed. Sidwell could orchestrate a scenario that appears accidental, a laboratory mishap, a staged equipment failure, or an unforeseen medical emergency, all carefully engineered to avoid raising suspicion. Alternatively, Sidwell could manipulate external parties, such as framing Sonny Corinthos, to both eliminate Dalton and destabilize rival interests, thereby consolidating his power. Each potential strategy reflects Sidwell's preference for control, precision, and plausible deniability, ensuring that his fingerprints remain invisible while the outcome serves his objectives.